So let's go ahead and take a look at the determinants of the short-run aggregate supply curve. What are the things that are going to shift our entire short-run aggregate supply curve to the right, away from the origin, or shift it to the left towards the origin? So we need to shift our entire curve in either direction. And we're going to follow the same process that we built up when we talked about the determinants of aggregate demand. The one thing that is going to be different, however, is that there are actually no subcategories with any of these things. So we just take them as given, and we want to build up our intuition to see exactly which way they're going to shift. As before, shifts of the SRAS curve, a factor that shifts the SRAS curve to the right, will increase aggregate output at every single price level. So SRAS over to SRAS1, we shift our point A to point B, we end up on an entirely new short-run aggregate supply curve. So we'll change things up just a little bit here, and we'll go ahead and take a look at the determinants of SRAS when we have decreases. So here we're going to be shifting from SRAS1 to SRAS0 when we do all of these shifts right here, just to change things up just a little bit. So here, take a look at these determinants of SRAS. So short-run aggregate supply. So remember, these are the things that are only going to be shifting our short-run aggregate supply curve. First, we take a look at input prices. Input prices. So here, we build up our short-run aggregate supply curve. We have SRAS0, and we want to see exactly how it's going to shift over to the left towards the origin to SRAS1. Remember, we have the price level, we have GDP, our output on the horizontal axis, and we're going to be doing this only for one particular shift. Remember, change it to the opposite direction to see what happens in the opposite case. So what has to happen for these input prices, with these input prices, in order for firms, corporations to want to supply less of their good or service out into the marketplace? So here, with input prices, remember that inputs, they can refer to raw materials, they can refer to wages. So anything that's going to be used in the production of a good or service, we consider this to be inputs. So with input prices, firms and corporations, they don't like to see their input prices be very high. They want to pay very low for raw materials. They want to pay very low for wages. So here, if input prices are going to increase, that's going to cause them to supply less within the marketplace. So here, we shift SRAS0 to SRAS1. And this is the sort of transition that we talked about in the previous lecture of how exactly we transition from the short run over to the long run. So here, remember that wages are going to be driven up. This is where workers start to ask for higher wages. This is exactly what we're sort of talking about when we sort of modeled that transition in the previous video. So something to be a little bit aware about. The second one that we can talk about, the second determinant, is going to be combining technology and productivity. Technology and productivity. So here, number one, we have input prices. Number two, we have technology and productivity. And as before, we want to see exactly how we're going to be shifting this over to the left. So price level, quantity, this is SRAS1, and then SRAS, our benchmark, SRAS0. So with technology, what type of shock do we have to have with technology in order for us to produce less? That's going to be a negative tech shock, so negative technology shock. So suppose that there's some type of malware or someone's launching a sort of cyber attack that sort of limits how much technology we can use. We consider this to be a negative tech shock. We're going to be able to supply fewer goods and services as a whole. And then how about for productivity? Obviously, we have less productive workers here. So less productive workers just tells us that, hey, they're not going to be as efficient, they're not going to be as productive as before, so therefore we're going to be supplying fewer goods and fewer services. So we can say that maybe there's some type of epidemic that comes along that sort of limits exactly how productive they may be, or exactly they're just being very lazy and they don't want to work. We can include that under productivity. Next, we take a look at taxes and regulation, so something familiar as well. So taxes and regulation. So regulation. Remember, we talked about taxes on the demand side. We also see taxes on the supply side here as well. So we're going to be sort of clear about exactly how taxes, when they change, what side of the market they're going to be affecting. So once again, be aware of that. We go from SRAS1, shift it to SRAS0. So SRAS0 to SRAS1, shifting the supply curve over towards the origin. Obviously, what has to happen for taxes for firms to want to supply less? They're going to be increase in taxes, increases in taxes. So firms, corporations, they do not like taxes. The higher the tax rate goes, the less they are going to want to produce. And in terms of regulation, they also do not like regulation. So increases in regulation. So the higher the regulation or the stricter the regulation is for the country, that is going to increase the cost for firms and businesses. It increases their operating costs essentially. So here, increases in taxes, increases in regulations, they work in the same exact direction, and that has the impact of shifting our SRES curve over to the left. Remember, just for completion, if you want to see exactly what happens in the opposite case, just change these things that are underlined to the opposite direction. So here, if you want to see increases in SRES, just move this to the opposite case. We have decreases in taxes, decreases in regulation. Fourth determinant we take a look at is one that you probably haven't heard of before. It's called the market power of firms. Market power of firms. With the market power of firms, this is just detailing exactly how much or how do they have a lot of ability to change the prices within their particular industry. So here, just formally putting, market power is the ability of firms to change prices. Of firms to change prices. So do they have a lot of market power where they have the ability to change the prices, or do they not have a lot of market power where they have to take the prices as given? You hit the idea of market power a little bit more in your microeconomics class, where you take a look at different business structures or market structures. So things like perfect competition, oligopoly, monopolistic competition, and monopoly themselves. So with this, we notice that we have price level, we have GDP, and we have SRAS1, and we're going to shift it SRAS0. So in order for firms to be wanting to supply less in this instance, what do you think has to happen to the market power of firms? Once again, this is going to be a little bit unusual in this case. We're going to have to say that the market power of firms or the industry, whatever we may be taking a look at, has to increase. So market power of firms increases. So here, when the market power of firms increases, they have a lot more ability to change the prices for whatever good they are selling. And in order for them to increase the prices or charge higher prices for the good they're selling, they're actually going to want to limit how much quantity is within the marketplace. And that has the sort of innate impact of shifting the SRES curve over to the left. They're going to be supplying less. It's exactly how monopolies and oligopolies raise prices. They don't flood the market with the product. They are going to limit exactly how much they produce or put out into the marketplace. So here, that's going to shift our SRES curve over to the left. So the higher the market power, the less supply there's going to be. And then finally here, we go ahead and take a look at the last determinant, which are inflation expectations. Inflation expectations. And once again, inflation just tells us that, hey, what's happening at the price level of this particular sort of market. So price level, quantity, and once again, we just want to see exactly how our SRES curve shifts towards the origin. And not surprisingly, it's going to say that if inflation expectations increase, the firms and corporations are going to want to go ahead and supply less. So here we have inflation expectations increase. So if inflation expectations increase, firms and corporations believe that price levels are going to go up in the future, then they're going to go ahead and supply less. So all these determinants that we have right here, basically go ahead, draw them out, do a lot of practice with them. We have input prices, we have productivity and technology, taxes, regulation, market power, and inflation expectations. Essentially, once again, we come to a summary table that details everything that we've done on the right-hand side. So this column right here, so SRES decreases. I would highly encourage you guys to go ahead, take a look at that, make sure you get the intuition and the critical thinking behind it, but also get enough practice by moving all of these determinants to the opposite case and seeing what happens with SRES increases. Once again, supply and demand analysis making its way right here. So drawing out these graphs, getting the illustration in the back of your minds, knowing exactly what's happening is going to be a very good thing as we work through this model right here. Now that we've detailed everything that we need to do about aggregate demand, short-run aggregate supply, and long-run aggregate supply, we can combine all three of these curves into one Cartesian plane, into one graph, and see where our equilibrium or macroeconomic equilibrium is going to lie. Do we have short-run equilibrium? Do we have long-run macroeconomic equilibrium? It's all going to depend on the curves that we detailed and derived, and seeing exactly how they come all together into one graph. We'll go ahead, take a closer look at that next.